The first light of dawn crept through the frost-glazed windows of the Grandmont Hotel, painting long gold streaks across the marble floor. In the servants' wing, where the scent of polish, starch, and old linen never quite faded, Alicia Bennett whispered the same words she had every morning for 3 years. "Today things change." She said it softly, pressing the iron against her maid's uniform, watching steam rise like breath from her chest. The words had become a ritual, a small rebellion she repeated to herself before facing another day of invisibility. Somewhere upstairs, the wealthy guests were stirring, their breakfast orders already trickling down through the brass service tubes like commandments from another world. Alicia straightened the crisp white collar of her navy uniform and glanced at her reflection in the narrow mirror above her cot. Her dark hair was neatly pinned, her eyes shadowed but steady. She had grown used to her own quiet face, used to being unseen by everyone who mattered. The Grandmont was the kind of place where money whispered and marble echoed. Built in 1898 and remodeled too many times to remember, it loomed over the heart of the city like a palace of glass. Chandeliers dripped from the ceilings, and every hallway gleamed as though polished by invisible hands. Alicia was one of those hands. By 6:30, she was already gliding through the back corridors, her shoes silent against the tile, her cart rattling faintly with the day's arsenal, dusting cloths, soap, polish, gloves. The other maids passed her with tired smiles. Some talked about husbands or children or the aches in their legs. Alicia didn't join in much. Words, she had learned, could be stolen or twisted, silence was safer. She reached room 204, the Whitmore's suite. The name alone was enough to tighten her chest. Harold and Elaine Whitmore were old money, the kind that thought kindness was a charity for the poor, not a courtesy for the help. They stayed at the Grandmont every winter, turning their suite into a private kingdom. Elaine would drop her jewelry on the floor and demand Alicia find it. Harold liked to call her girl as if she had no name. And the manager, Mr. Clayton, smiled and nodded along, afraid to offend guests who could buy his career twice over. Alicia knocked lightly and entered with her practiced smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore." The woman sat at the vanity, wrapped in silk and self-importance. "You're late." "It's 6:45, ma'am." "Your request was for 7. "Then be early next time," Elaine snapped, as if the world itself existed to amuse her. "And for heaven's sake, don't touch my perfume bottles this time. Last week you moved one." "Yes, ma'am." Alicia moved quietly, dusting the corners, straightening the bedspread, adjusting pillows to their exact angles. Harold emerged from the adjoining room in his monogrammed robe, reading the financial section. He didn't acknowledge her at all. She preferred it that way. "Harold," Elaine said suddenly, "this maid is the one who spilled water on my shawl last month." Harold looked up, frowning. "Was she? I thought that one was dismissed." "Apparently not. Mr. Clayton has a soft heart for lost causes." They both laughed. Alicia's cheeks burned, but her face didn't move. She finished polishing the dresser and stepped back toward the door. "Will that be all, ma'am?" "For now," Elaine said. "But make sure the hallway mirror shines. Guests notice fingerprints." "Yes, ma'am." Outside, Alicia paused for a single breath, pressing her fingers against the cool brass doorknob to steady herself. Her father had once told her, long ago, before the Grandmont and the endless cycle of servitude, that dignity was not given, it was kept. She clung to that now. By mid-morning, the lobby was alive with the rustle of expensive coats and the murmur of people who believed the world revolved around them. Alicia moved like part of the architecture, seen, but not noticed. She passed the concierge desk, where Mr. Clayton greeted a wealthy couple with obsequious charm. When his eyes flicked to her, they carried the same cold warning they always did: keep moving. The Grandmont's hierarchy was invisible but absolute. Guests on top, management next, staff below, and beneath even that, the maids. They existed in the building's bloodstream, essential yet unacknowledged, their labor the quiet pulse that kept luxury alive. Alicia's break came at 10. She sat in the laundry room among the clatter of machines, sipping coffee from a paper cup gone soft with reuse. On the corkboard above her, faded staff notices hung beside photographs of people who had left long ago. Her gaze settled on one image near the corner, her father, Samuel Bennett, smiling in his maintenance uniform, holding a wrench like a scepter. The photo had survived years of management changes and renovations. Few people remembered him now. Most thought he died in an accident, a fall during repairs. Alicia had been 12 then, old enough to know grief but too young to understand corruption. Her mother had died 2 winters later, leaving only the letter, sealed and forbidden, that now lay hidden in Alicia's small trunk beneath her cot. That letter was why she whispered her morning mantra. That letter, and the faint promise that someday she would learn what really happened to her father in the hotel's West Wing 14 years ago. The door creaked open. Old Mrs. Turner, the head laundress, shuffled in, wiping her hands on her apron. "You all right, love? You look far away." Alicia managed a smile. "Just thinking. Don't think too much in this place. These walls have long memories." Alicia nodded. She had heard that before, stories about rooms that went unused, ledgers that disappeared, accidents that were never investigated. But she wasn't superstitious. Her ghosts were made of paper, ink, and unanswered questions. By noon, she was back on her floor, polishing banisters that gleamed like liquid gold. Through the tall windows, snow began to fall in slow, deliberate flakes. Guests admired it from inside, holding cocktails and laughter. Alicia paused for half a heartbeat, watching the city blur into white. That was when Mr. Clayton appeared behind her. "Bennett," he said sharply. "You'll attend to the front lobby this afternoon. We're expecting a guest, Mr. Reeves. He's a lawyer, coming on business for the owners. Try not to embarrass the hotel." "Yes, sir." He turned away before she could ask anything more. A lawyer. Business for the owners. The words echoed strangely in her mind. When she returned to her small room that night, she set her uniform aside and opened her trunk. The envelope waited there, yellowed edges, her name written in her father's old, steady hand. It had been given to her by a friend of his after the funeral, with instructions: "Do not open until you are ready." Her fingers hovered over it, trembling. For years, she had feared what it might say. But something about that morning felt different, something in the air, in the rhythm of her whispered vow. Tomorrow, a lawyer named Reeves would arrive. Tomorrow, she might finally learn the truth that had slept inside this hotel longer than she had. Alicia blew out the lamp and lay in the dark, listening to the distant hum of the Grandmont's elevators and the muffled laughter of its wealthy ghosts. "Tomorrow," she whispered again. "Tomorrow things change." And for the first time, she almost believed it. By morning, the Grandmont Hotel was a theater again, its chandeliers blazing, its corridors echoing with the rustle of silk and the click of polished shoes. For the staff, it was another day of smiling servitude; for the wealthy, another day of being adored. Alicia Bennett had long ago learned her role in this silent production, to glide through the scene unseen, to vanish before her presence disturbed the air. But that morning, a restlessness clung to her like static. She felt it while tying her apron, while pinning her name tag, while catching her reflection in the service hallway mirror. Her whispered vow, "Today things change," hummed in her chest with unfamiliar weight. Outside room 204, she paused. The Whitmores were already awake. She could hear Elaine's voice slicing through the door like a blade. "And I told him, Harold, that the service here has gone downhill. The staff are practically savages." Came Harold's distracted murmur. The man rarely spoke in complete sentences unless discussing money. Alicia knocked softly, forcing her tone into the polite rhythm required of servants. "Housekeeping." "Enter," Elaine snapped. Alicia stepped in and was met instantly by the glare of sunlight through tall windows. The Whitmore's suite was a kingdom of excess, crystal decanters, embroidered cushions, and the lingering scent of imported perfume that cost more than Alicia's yearly wages. Elaine Whitmore stood at the vanity in a silk robe the color of champagne, her hair perfectly arranged despite the early hour. Harold lounged in a chair by the window, reading the financial pages as though the world beyond them were an abstraction. "About time," Elaine said. "The carpet's a disgrace, and I specifically asked for roses, not lilies. Do you people even listen?" Alicia bowed her head slightly. "Apologies, ma'am. I'll see to the flowers right away. Don't bother. It's already ruined the tone of the morning." Elaine turned sharply, a cup of coffee trembling slightly in her manicured hand. "And bring me another coffee. The last one was cold." "I'll replace it now, ma'am." But as Alicia reached for the cup, Elaine made a careless gesture, a flick of her wrist, and the dark liquid sloshed across Alicia's sleeve. Elaine gasped in exaggerated outrage. "You clumsy girl. Look what you've done." For a moment, time fractured. The steaming stain spread down the white cuff like blood, and Alicia's breath caught. Every instinct told her to apologize, to bow lower, to accept blame as she had 100 times before. But this morning, the old obedience faltered. "I believe it spilled from your hand, ma'am," she said quietly. The air in the suite tightened. Harold lowered his paper. Elaine's eyes went sharp with disbelief. "What did you say?" Alicia met her gaze for a heartbeat. "I said it was an accident, ma'am. No harm done." Silence pooled between them. Then Elaine's mouth curled into a thin, dangerous smile. "Get out. Fetch Mr. Clayton. I won't be spoken to like that by a maid." Alicia hesitated, the smallest pause, but enough to ignite fury. "Now!" Elaine shouted. Alicia left the room with her pulse pounding in her throat. She could feel eyes on her as she crossed the hall, other maids peeking from doorways, bellboys freezing mid-step. In a hotel like the Grandmont, gossip traveled faster than sound. Mr. Clayton was in the lobby, speaking to a guest. His expression changed instantly when he saw her, polite charm replaced by irritation. "What is it, Bennett?" "Mrs. Whitmore requests your presence in her suite," Alicia said, keeping her tone level. "Immediately." He sighed through his nose. "What did you do this time?" Alicia didn't answer. She didn't trust herself to. When they returned to room 204, Elaine was waiting like a queen before execution. "Mr. Clayton," she began sweetly, "this woman has insulted me. She spilled coffee on me, then lied about it to my face." Clayton's eyes flicked to Alicia. "Is that true?" "No, sir." The cup slipped from. "Enough." His voice snapped through the air like a whip. You'll apologize to Mrs. Whitmore at once. Alicia swallowed the knot in her throat. She could feel the weight of her father's photo in her pocket, the ghost of his patience watching her. She bowed her head. I'm sorry, ma'am. Elaine tilted her chin high, savoring victory. Sorry doesn't clean silk. I want her dismissed. Today. Clayton's face tensed. He was cornered. The Whitmores were important clients. Mrs. Whitmore, please, that won't be necessary. I said today. Do you need me to remind you how much business my husband brings to this hotel? Clayton's jaw tightened. Of course not. Alicia stood frozen, her breath shallow, the polished floor swimming before her. Around them, the city's luxury murmured on, footsteps, distant laughter, a piano somewhere below, as if mocking the quiet destruction of a single human being. Gather your things, Clayton said, avoiding her eyes. We'll settle the paperwork by afternoon. Elaine turned away, already done with her. Do make sure she leaves quietly, Mr. Clayton. We wouldn't want to upset the other guests. Alicia wanted to speak, to defend herself, to scream, to tell them what kind of cruelty hid behind their perfect manners, but the words lodged somewhere behind her ribs. She simply nodded and left, her steps soundless on the thick carpet. In the corridor, the other maids avoided her eyes. A few whispered condolences, others just shook their heads, grateful it wasn't them. Alicia reached the end of the hallway, where the tall mirror gleamed, the one Elaine had ordered her to polish just yesterday. She stared at her reflection, pale, small, invisible again. But beneath the surface of her calm face, something had shifted. She went to the staff room to collect her things, her hands trembling not with fear but with fury held in check. The faint scent of detergent, the hum of the machines, all of it blurred into noise. She reached for her locker, pulling out her small bag. Inside lay the sealed envelope, the one her father had left. For years, she had kept it hidden, unopened. But now, with her job gone and her dignity trampled, what else did she have to lose? Before she could tear it open, the door creaked behind her. Mr. Clayton stepped in, his expression strained. Bennett, he said. Perhaps you're lucky. There's a lawyer arriving today, Mr. Reeves. He asked to see you specifically. No idea why. Said it concerns your family. Alicia turned slowly. My family? That's what he said. He'll be here by noon. Don't make a scene. Just meet him in the East office and then be gone from the premises quietly. Understood? She nodded. When he left, the laundry machines drummed like distant thunder. Alicia looked down at the envelope again, her father's name written in fading ink, for Alicia, when you're ready. The room seemed to breathe around her, the fluorescent lights flickering slightly. She thought of Elaine's smirk, of the marble floors her knees had polished, of the life she'd been told to accept. Maybe, at last, this was what her morning vow had meant. Maybe today things change wasn't just a whisper, it was a summons. She slipped the letter back into her bag, straightened her uniform one last time, and walked out of the servants' corridor into the bright, echoing lobby. The great clock above the reception desk struck 12. Outside, through the revolving glass doors, a tall man in a charcoal suit was stepping into the Grandmont's light, briefcase in hand, eyes scanning the room. Mr. Reeves had arrived. At precisely noon, the revolving doors of the Grandmont Hotel gave a slow, dignified turn, and a tall man in a charcoal gray suit stepped through. His coat was brushed clean of snow, his shoes glinting like mirrors. Everything about him spoke of deliberate control, the kind that comes from long years of knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Thomas Reeves carried a briefcase of black leather and an air of quiet authority that made the lobby hush for half a breath as he entered. The concierge greeted him with rehearsed cheer, but Reeves's eyes were already scanning the room, searching for someone. Not for the manager or a client. For someone else. Alicia watched him from near the service corridor, her hands still damp from polishing the brass rails. There was something foreign about the sight of a man like him asking for her by name, the invisible maid, as though the world had finally tilted, if only slightly. "Mr. Reeves," the manager said, stepping forward with an oily smile. "We're honored to have you back at the Grandmont. Shall I prepare the Whitmore suite for you?" Reeves returned the greeting with a polite nod. "No, thank you. My appointment isn't with the Whitmores." Mr. Clayton hesitated. "Oh. Then perhaps I can assist you personally." Reeves's gaze flicked briefly toward the service hallway. "I'm here to see a member of your staff. Miss Alicia Bennett." The manager's composure faltered for half a second before he recovered. "Ah, of course. I'll have her sent down immediately." He turned sharply to Alicia, who had already stepped forward. "Bennett, this gentleman wishes to speak with you. Keep it brief and don't." But Reeves interrupted gently. "There's a private office near the East Wing, I believe. We'll use that." Mr. Clayton's smile tightened. "As you wish." He didn't like it. Alicia could see that. The idea of a lawyer meeting privately with a maid unsettled him, as if the invisible machinery of class had misfired. The East office was small, paneled in walnut, its windows facing the snow-blurred city. A desk, 2 chairs, and a ticking clock filled the space. Reeves set his briefcase on the desk and gestured for her to sit. "Miss Bennett," he began, his voice calm, low, measured. "I know this meeting must be unexpected." "Yes, sir," she said softly, folding her hands in her lap. "The manager said you had business concerning my family." Reeves nodded. "Your father, Samuel Bennett." The name hit the air like a quiet strike of a bell. Alicia's breath stilled. Reeves drew out a folder, its edges worn. "I was retained some years ago to handle a set of documents that, for reasons I'll explain, were sealed. I've spent the past few months tracing the proper recipient. That recipient is you." He opened the folder, revealing an envelope identical to the one Alicia kept hidden beneath her cot, same paper, same looping handwriting. Her voice wavered. Where did you get that?" "It was deposited with my predecessor by a Mr. Samuel Bennett, 14 years ago. He left instructions that it was to be opened only upon confirmation of certain property disputes connected to this hotel." "Property disputes," she repeated faintly. Reeves nodded, watching her carefully. "Your father was part of the original maintenance and development team during the Grandmont's major renovation in 2009. He wasn't merely staff, Miss Bennett. He was an equity partner, a small one, but legitimate. His contribution was recorded in the hotel's early financial ledgers." Alicia blinked. "That's impossible." He was just an employee." "So they told you," Reeves said quietly. "But I've reviewed the documents. Your father invested part of his pension and savings in the modernization fund. In return, he was promised a 2% share in future profits. That agreement was never honored." The words hung between them like something fragile and dangerous. "What happened?" she whispered. Reeves's expression softened. "From what I've uncovered, your father discovered irregularities in the hotel's financial transfers. He raised concerns about certain expense accounts, including those controlled by Harold Whitmore. Days later, there was an accident. The investigation concluded he fell during a repair. But the report was signed by a consultant on the Whitmore's payroll. The office seemed to shrink around her. Alicia's hands gripped the edge of the chair. "You're saying my father was—" "I'm saying," Reeves interrupted gently, "that the truth was buried. And now, the evidence has resurfaced." He slid a document toward her, photocopies of old ledgers, her father's signature alongside that of Harold Whitmore. Another page showed a handwritten note in Samuel Bennett's blocky script: "If anything happens, this place holds the reason." Alicia stared at it until her vision blurred. Reeves waited, giving her space to breathe. "I know this is much to take in. But there's more. Your father left a will, one that names you as the inheritor of his stake in the Grandmont." Her lips parted. "His stake?" "Yes. It isn't fortune-making, but legally it means you have partial ownership rights. Rights that were quietly ignored for 14 years. The weight of the words pressed against her chest until she could barely inhale. For so long she had walked these halls as though she were part of the wallpaper, scrubbing the floors that her father had once helped build. "How did you find me?" she asked finally. "I traced his estate through archived employee records," Reeves replied. "It wasn't easy. Someone had removed your family's file from the hotel system. But a handwritten note from your father led me here. He wrote that his daughter would likely still be working in the Grandmont, because she had nowhere else to go." Her throat tightened. She blinked back sudden tears. Reeves's tone softened. "He also wrote that if you ever received this letter, you should read it only when you were ready to face the truth. Do you feel ready now, Miss Bennett?" For a long moment, Alicia couldn't answer. Her fingers brushed the envelope, tracing her father's name. Then she nodded once. "Yes." Reeves passed it to her with care. She opened it slowly, the paper crackling. Inside was a single handwritten page. "My dearest Alicia. If you're reading this, it means my voice is gone, but my truth must live on. I discovered something inside these walls, something men like Whitmore would destroy anyone to protect. They took what was ours and called it progress. If they silence me, promise me you will not seek revenge, but justice. The Grandmont was built on lies, but you were not. Remember that, my girl. Your father, Samuel Bennett." Alicia folded the letter carefully, her breath shaking. The sound of the city outside was faint, car horns muted by snow, the distant hum of life continuing unaware. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Reeves sat back. "I'll file a legal notice of claim. Once the courts validate your father's contract, the Whitmores will be summoned for disclosure. They've concealed ownership transfers, and that is a serious crime. You will have to testify, but I'll guide you through every step." She stared at him, hardly believing. "You mean, people will finally know?" He nodded. "They will." Alicia looked down at her stained hands, the same hands that had scrubbed the Grandmont's marble floors every day for 3 years. For the first time, they didn't feel powerless. They felt steady. When Reeves stood to leave, she rose too. "Mr. Reeves," she said softly, "why are you doing this?" He paused at the door. "Because your father once saved my life." She looked up sharply. "I was a law student working part-time here back then," he continued. "I slipped on a scaffold near the West Wing. He caught me before I fell. I never forgot the look on his face, calm, certain, like a man who believed in doing the right thing even when no one noticed." He gave a faint smile. "Now it's time someone noticed." When he left, Alicia remained alone in the small office. She pressed her father's letter to her heart and closed her eyes. Somewhere deep beneath her feet, the Grandmont's old pipes groaned, as if the building itself were exhaling after years of holding its breath. In that sound, Alicia heard a promise. The world was beginning to shift. The snow had thickened outside by the time Alicia left the east office. Flakes drifted past the tall lobby windows, softening the world beyond the glass. The Grandmont looked almost peaceful from within its cocoon of marble and gold, but to Alicia, every hallway felt alive with ghosts. Her father's words burned through her chest: "If they silence me, promise me you will not seek revenge, but justice." For the first time, those words weren't just memory. They were a direction. She spent the afternoon moving through the hotel as if tracing invisible threads. Each corridor whispered reminders: the creak of a stair her father once repaired, the faint hum of lights he'd rewired. She remembered him whistling softly while working, his calloused hands steady even after 12 hours on his feet. Back then, she'd sometimes wait in the maintenance room after school, perched on a paint-splattered stool, listening to him talk about blueprints and fairness. "A building," he'd said once, "is only as honest as the men who build it." Now, walking those same corridors, Alicia felt the weight of that honesty pressing down like the ceiling itself. She reached the West Wing. No guests ever came here anymore. The doors were locked, the wallpaper faded, the air faintly metallic with age. It was the oldest part of the Grandmont, the original structure her father had helped renovate, and it had been sealed since the accident. Alicia hesitated at the velvet rope that marked the boundary. A "no entry" sign hung loosely from a nail. She checked over her shoulder, no one in sight. Then she slipped beneath it and pushed open the door. The smell hit first: dust, plaster, and something else, the quiet decay of abandonment. Light filtered through narrow, dirty windows, falling across furniture draped in sheets. Her footsteps echoed down the long hallway, stirring tiny clouds of dust. It was here, in this forgotten wing, that her father had fallen. At least, that was what she'd been told. She moved room by room, her hand trailing the wall. In one chamber, a chandelier lay collapsed like a broken crown. In another, an old tool chest stood open, its contents rusted. The silence was so deep she could hear the slow ticking of the radiator pipes. When she reached the far end of the corridor, she found the small mechanical room that Reeves had mentioned in his file. The lock was broken, old damage, untouched since. She pushed the door inward and stepped into a space filled with the ghost of machinery. The walls were lined with pipes and wiring, and in the corner stood a rusted ladder leading up to a ceiling hatch. Her heart kicked. This was where it had happened. Her father had been repairing a ventilation duct when he'd fallen, they said. But something about the room felt wrong. The angle of the ladder, the pattern of dust. Too neat. Too arranged. She crouched, brushing her fingers along the floor until she found a faint groove, a line where something heavy had been dragged, once, across the concrete. Her breath came shallow. She followed the line to the base of the wall. There, half hidden behind a pipe, a small panel was set into the plaster, a maintenance box, long sealed with paint. She pried it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a folded piece of paper, brittle with age, and an old hotel ledger card. The paper bore her father's handwriting. "They know. Clayton took the keys from the lower office. If anything happens, tell Alicia to look in the west wall behind the pipes. Trust Reeves. He's the only one who might listen." She read the words 3 times before her vision cleared enough to see again. Her hands were shaking. Reeves. He'd been part of this story all along, even before he knew it. A sudden noise startled her. A door slammed somewhere behind. She froze, heart hammering. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly through the corridor. Someone else was in the wing. Alicia pressed herself into the shadows beside the wall. The footsteps grew nearer, slow, deliberate. Through the crack in the door, she glimpsed a familiar shape, a man in a tailored suit, pausing to peer into each abandoned room. Mr. Clayton. Her stomach tightened. What was he doing here? Miss Bennett, his voice called softly, too calm, too smooth. You shouldn't be wandering where you don't belong. She said nothing, clutching the papers to her chest. I thought I made it clear this wing was off limits. His shoes scraped against the floor. It's dangerous. You could get hurt, like your father. The implication landed like a blow. Clayton stopped near the doorway, his voice lowering. You've been speaking with Mr. Reeves, haven't you? I advise you to stay quiet. The Whitmores have long memories, and the hotel doesn't take kindly to troublemakers. He turned slightly, his profile visible through the gap. The faintest smirk touched his mouth. Your father didn't listen either. And look how that ended. Alicia's pulse roared in her ears. She waited until his footsteps faded before daring to move. When the sound was gone, she slipped out through a side passage, her shoes barely whispering on the floor. Back in the lit corridors of the guest wing, the world felt surreal. The music from the restaurant below floated faintly through the vents. Guests laughed over cocktails, oblivious that the walls around them held ghosts and secrets. She found Reeves in the lobby cafe, nursing a coffee and scanning documents. His eyes lifted as she approached, and he saw the color drain from her face. What happened? He asked. I went to the West Wing, she said, voice trembling. I found a note, my father's handwriting. It mentions you. He knew you before he died. Reeves stood immediately, guiding her to a quieter table. Show me. She unfolded the papers. He read in silence, jaw tightening. This confirms it, he murmured. Your father suspected foul play. Clayton's name here is significant. It means he wasn't just complicit after the fact, he was part of the cover-up. He was there, Alicia whispered. Just now. He followed me. Reeves's eyes darkened. You're not safe here alone. Stay near the public areas until we file this. I'll arrange for the copies to be notarized tonight. But what if they destroy the evidence? They won't, he said firmly. I've already backed up everything. And if they try to interfere, the police will have to be involved. The law is slow, Miss Bennett, but it does move. She wanted to believe him. But as she looked around the glittering lobby, the same floor her father had scrubbed, the same chandeliers he'd installed, she felt the weight of years pressing down. The Grandmont had always belonged to others. People like her were just caretakers of their lives. Not anymore. Later that night, after Reeves left to prepare his case files, Alicia lingered alone by the grand staircase. The walls seemed to hum with faint echoes, whispers layered through time. She could almost hear her father's voice, calm and steady, a building is only as honest as the men who build it. She gazed upward at the golden ceiling, at the light shimmering through glass that her father's hands might have touched, and whispered back, then it's time to rebuild it. In the distance, thunder rolled over the city, a sound deep and slow, like the earth itself remembering. Alicia turned toward the West Wing once more, the papers clutched in her hand. The ghosts of the Grandmont were awake now. And she would not let them rest until the truth stood in daylight. Evening descended upon the Grandmont like a performance curtain, the city lights outside shimmering against the falling snow. Inside, the lobby glowed with warm gold, a stage set for luxury and lies. The Whitmore's annual charity dinner was the highlight of the winter season, and tonight every inch of the hotel pulsed with that false glamour. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter echoed through corridors, and violins whispered beneath the chandeliers. To the guests, it was elegance. To Alicia, it was war. She stood in the staff prep room, buttoning her uniform with shaking hands. Reeves's words from earlier replayed in her mind, "They'll be here tonight. The documents are ready. You don't have to say a thing, just be present." Present. That was all she'd ever been, a presence in the background, a shadow carrying trays and taking orders. But tonight, she was stepping into the light, and the light could burn. "Bennett," said Mrs. Turner, the old laundress, catching sight of her in the doorway. "You look pale, love. You sure you want to be on the floor tonight?" Alicia smiled faintly. "It's just another dinner, Mrs. Turner." The woman sighed. "It's never just another dinner with the Whitmores." She was right. By 7 o'clock, the ballroom glittered with wealth, women in sequined gowns, men in tailored suits, laughter rising like smoke. The Grandmont's chandeliers bathed everything in a honeyed glow. In the center table, Harold and Elaine Whitmore held court, surrounded by their kind, people who spoke in compliments and smiled in cruelty. Alicia moved among them with practiced grace, her tray balanced, her eyes lowered. But beneath that calm exterior, her heart beat in sync with the ticking of the grand clock above the stage. She could feel the moment building, the fragile, terrifying promise of justice. Reeves arrived exactly at 7:30. He wore the same calm expression as always, but his eyes found Alicia immediately across the ballroom. He gave a barely perceptible nod. It was time. The hotel manager, Mr. Clayton, hovered near the Whitmores, his nervous smile straining under pressure. He'd been avoiding Alicia all evening, but she could sense his awareness of her. He knew she had seen too much. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elaine Whitmore's voice cut through the chatter as she rose from her seat, champagne glass in hand. "Thank you for joining us this evening for the Whitmore Foundation's Winter Gala. Tonight, we celebrate generosity and the art of giving back." There was polite applause. Alicia's jaw tightened. Giving back, she thought bitterly. They took from everyone else first. Elaine continued, "Before dinner, I'd like to acknowledge the Grandmont Hotel's management team for hosting us once again in such impeccable style. Mr. Clayton, you're a treasure." Clayton gave a humble bow, his grin fixed in place. At that moment, Reeves stepped forward. "If I may," he said, his voice steady but carrying easily across the room. "A brief word before the festivities continue." The crowd turned, curiosity flickering. Reeves held a leather folder in one hand, the same one Alicia had seen him prepare earlier. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, "but as legal counsel for the Bennett estate, I'm required to make a formal disclosure." The air changed. Laughter died away. Elaine's smile faltered. Harold frowned. "Disclosure?" she echoed. "At a charity dinner?" "Yes," Reeves said evenly. "It concerns the Grandmont's ownership records and the estate of one Samuel Bennett, a name some of you may remember." Alicia's breath hitched. Every face seemed to tilt toward her, though no one yet understood why. Reeves continued, 14 years ago, Mr. Bennett was a maintenance supervisor here. He was also, as documents now confirm, a partial investor during the hotel's redevelopment phase. His contractual stake, though small, was legitimate and legally binding. After his death, those records were quietly sealed under management directive, specifically, under Mr. Harold Whitmore's authorization. A collective murmur rippled through the room. Elaine's eyes widened, Harold's face hardened. "That's absurd," Harold snapped. "This is neither the time nor the place." "I disagree," Reeves said calmly. "Because it was here, in this very building, that the cover-up occurred. And it was your negligence that cost Mr. Bennett his life." The silence that followed was absolute. Only the faint clink of a dropped fork broke it. Clayton stepped forward, face pale. "Mr. Reeves, I must insist." But Reeves raised his voice slightly, projecting authority. "I have in my possession signed copies of financial ledgers, a handwritten note from Samuel Bennett, and corroborating statements from former employees indicating deliberate suppression of ownership rights. These documents will be filed with the court in the morning. However, in the interest of transparency, I thought it only fitting to make this public here, where it all began." The tension in the ballroom thickened. The guests shifted uncomfortably, torn between fascination and fear of association. Alicia stood motionless near the far wall, her tray trembling faintly in her hands. For a moment, the world blurred around her, the glittering lights, the shocked faces, until only one image remained, her father, smiling in his old uniform, telling her that truth was worth the wait. Elaine's voice cut through the air, high and sharp. "This is a stunt. A pathetic attempt to smear our name. Who even is this maid you've dragged into your little fantasy?" Reeves turned, eyes steady. "She's not a maid, Mrs. Whitmore. She's the rightful heir to Samuel Bennett's estate, and to his share of this hotel." The silence cracked like glass. Every head turned toward Alicia. The tray slipped from her hands and hit the floor, the crash ringing through the ballroom like a gunshot. She didn't flinch. She stood tall, trembling but unbroken. The years of invisibility peeled away in an instant. "I didn't want any of this," she said quietly, her voice carrying farther than she expected. "All I ever wanted was to know the truth about my father. You took that from me, you made me clean the floors he helped build. You called me less than human. But he believed this place could be honest. And tonight, it finally will be." The guests stared, some ashamed, some captivated. Elaine's mouth opened, but no words came. Harold surged to his feet. "This is defamation. You can't." "Sit down," Reeves said sharply, stepping closer. "If you have nothing to hide, you'll have your chance to defend yourself in court." Cameras flashed, reporters had been invited to cover the charity event, and now they captured every frozen expression, every panicked glance. The Whitmore's reputation was crumbling in real time. Clayton muttered something about handling this internally, and slipped toward the exit, face ashen. Reeves closed his folder, his tone measured again. "Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Dinner may continue, though I suspect the appetite for pretense has somewhat diminished." He looked once toward Alicia. There was quiet pride in his eyes, not triumph, but respect. As the crowd began to disperse into whispers, Alicia turned to leave, her steps slow and certain. For the first time in her life, no one ordered her to stop. No one told her to be silent. Outside the ballroom, she leaned against the cool marble wall, her breath trembling with release. The chandeliers behind her continued to sparkle, but their light seemed different now, no longer golden and false, but fractured, like something finally broken open. She heard Reeves's footsteps approach. "You did well," he said softly. "I only told the truth." He nodded. That's the hardest thing to tell in a place built on lies. She smiled faintly through tears. He'd have wanted it this way. I know, Reeves said. And tomorrow, we begin the rest. Through the ballroom doors, the orchestra started again, softer this time, a tune meant to soothe the uneasy. But nothing could unring the truth that had been spoken. For the first time in years, Alicia walked out of the Grandmont not as a servant, but as a witness, and as her father's daughter. The morning after the gala, the Grandmont no longer glittered. Its chandeliers hung in silence, the echo of last night's applause replaced by whispers and footsteps that moved too quickly. The newspapers had already arrived. Their front pages carried photographs of Harold and Elaine Whitmore mid-argument, their faces twisted in disbelief beneath the headline. Hotel heirs accused in cover-up scandal, Maid revealed as true owner's daughter. Alicia read it in the staff cafeteria, the paper trembling faintly in her hands. Around her, the other employees spoke in hushed tones, pretending not to look at her but failing. The same faces that had once passed her without notice now stared with a mixture of awe, guilt, and fear. You're famous, one of the younger maids whispered, half amused, half terrified. I didn't want to be, Alicia murmured. Her coffee had gone cold, untouched. Her uniform felt foreign now, a costume borrowed from a life that had already ended. Reeves entered quietly, holding his briefcase and a folded copy of the morning paper. His eyes were calm, but behind them flickered the exhaustion of a man who had fought too long in silence. They've filed an emergency injunction, he said, setting the paper beside her. Whitmore's lawyers are claiming defamation and emotional distress. It won't hold, but it means we'll have to move faster. Alicia nodded. And the hotel? Corporate's in panic mode. The ownership board has called an emergency meeting. Once the court acknowledges your father's partnership documents, they'll have to recognize your legal share. She let out a slow breath. And Mr. Clayton? Reeves hesitated. He resigned at dawn. I suspect he's already speaking with investigators. They'll want him to testify against the Whitmores in exchange for leniency. She looked down, her jaw tight. He knew all along. Yes, Reeves said softly. He did. But guilt has a way of catching up. Even for men like him. The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the building's heating system. Alicia folded the newspaper carefully and stood. I need to see the West Wing. Reeves studied her for a moment, then nodded. I'll come with you. The West Wing looked different in daylight. The windows filtered pale morning light through dust, revealing the details time had tried to erase, the scuffs on the wall, the faded boot prints on the floor, the rusted tools abandoned mid-task. They walked in silence until they reached the maintenance room. Alicia knelt where her father had fallen, running her fingers along the old concrete, tracing the faint groove she had discovered days earlier. It feels strange, she said quietly. To stand where it happened and not be afraid anymore. Reeves crouched beside her. Fear and truth rarely live in the same room. One always chases the other away. She smiled faintly at that. He unfolded new papers, copies of statements, court filings, old blueprints. These, he said, are now public record. Your father's name will be restored in the archives. His death certificate will be amended from accidental to under investigation. It's not the justice he deserved, but it's a start. Alicia's throat tightened. She looked up at the ceiling where dust drifted through beams of light like falling memory. He always said walls remember. I used to think he was talking about ghosts. Now I think he meant this, the truth that stays even when everyone forgets. They stood in silence, the air thick with the past. By afternoon, the city had devoured the story. News vans parked outside the Grandmont. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashing every time a guest or staff member tried to leave. Scandal in the Marble Palace, one headline declared. Alicia avoided the front entrance, slipping instead through the staff passageways she knew by heart. But even there, whispers followed her. Some of the staff looked at her with newfound respect. Others looked at her as though she were a ghost returned to haunt them for their silence. At one point, she passed Mrs. Turner in the laundry room. The old woman reached out, touching her sleeve. "Your father would be proud, love. But take care. The powerful don't fall quietly." "I know," Alicia said softly. "But I've been quiet long enough." That evening, Reeves called her to the conference room. Inside sat two members of the hotel's ownership board, men who wore their wealth like armor. Their expressions were carefully polite, but their unease hung heavy. "Miss Bennett," said the elder of the two, "first, allow us to extend our condolences regarding the loss of your father. None of us were aware." Reeves interrupted, his tone sharp. "With respect, gentlemen, the board received the original partnership memorandum in 2009. If you weren't aware, it's because you chose not to be." The younger man cleared his throat. "Regardless, the situation has become delicate. The Whitmore's assets are entangled with ours. If this goes to trial, it could sink the Grandmont entirely." Alicia's gaze was steady. "Then maybe it deserves to sink." The older man flinched. "Miss Bennett, please. You have to understand, hundreds of jobs." "I do understand," she said. "That's why I'm not selling my father's share. I want this place to stand. But I want it to stand honestly." Reeves looked at her, impressed by the quiet steel in her voice. After a long silence, the elder board member sighed. "Very well. We'll prepare a provisional arrangement, one that recognizes your claim while the investigation proceeds. You'll be granted temporary authority over operations. Consider it a gesture of good faith." Alicia nodded. "Good faith starts with truth. Make sure the staff are treated fairly. No more invisible hands." The men exchanged uneasy glances but agreed. When they left, Reeves exhaled. "You realize you just became the first woman, and the first staff member, to ever hold power in this building." Alicia gave a small, weary smile. "Then I'll make sure I'm not the last." Night fell quietly. The lobby was nearly empty now, the glamour stripped away, leaving only the raw bones of the building her father had helped raise. She walked across the marble floor barefoot, her shoes in hand, listening to the echo of her steps. Every tile, every shadow felt different. The Grandmont was no longer just a monument to other people's pride, it was evidence of her father's endurance, and of her own. She paused near the main entrance. Outside, flashes from cameras still sparked in the snow, but she didn't shy away. She pushed open the door and stepped into the cold. The reporters surged forward, shouting questions. "Miss Bennett, are you suing the Whitmores? Do you plan to sell your share? Were you aware of the fraud before last night?" She stopped on the steps and faced them. "My father believed in this hotel," she said, her voice steady over the wind. "He believed it could be a place built on work, not lies. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to finish what he started." The cameras clicked in rhythm, like applause made of light. Reeves joined her at the doorway, a faint smile crossing his face. "You just turned their scandal into a statement," he murmured. "I just told the truth," she said. The snow continued to fall, slow and soft, dusting the stone lions at the entrance. Somewhere above, the clock tower struck midnight, its deep bell rolling across the city, one day ending, another beginning. Inside the Grandmont, the lights flickered once, as if the old building were taking a long, tired breath. The fallout had begun, but so had the cleansing. The courthouse smelled of old paper and dust, the scent of justice aged in silence. The walls were tall and plain, no chandeliers, no marble polish, only echoes. Yet to Alicia Bennett, it was the grandest room she had ever entered. It had been 3 weeks since the gala. 3 weeks of headlines, lawyers, and sleepless nights. Reeves had moved through it all with calm precision, filing motion after motion, collecting testimony from former employees, chasing signatures long buried in ledgers. He was the steady hand. Alicia was the heartbeat. Now, as she sat beside him at the long oak table, she could feel the pulse of something irreversible. The truth was finally stepping into daylight. Across the room, the Whitmores sat like statues, Harold rigid and gray-faced, Elaine masked in pearls and disdain. Their lawyers whispered urgently, stacking papers like shields. Behind them, Mr. Clayton sat alone, eyes downcast, a man stripped of his practiced confidence. The judge entered, a woman in her 50s with the weary dignity of someone who'd seen too much human pretense. "Court is now in session," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "We are here to determine the validity of the Bennett estate's claim and the conduct of the Grandmont Hotel's managing parties in the matter of concealment and fraud." Reeves rose smoothly. "Your Honor, the plaintiff is Miss Alicia Bennett, daughter of the late Samuel Bennett, former maintenance supervisor, equity partner, and whistleblower at the Grandmont Hotel." A ripple of murmurs moved through the courtroom. The Whitmore's lawyer stood to counter, his tone clipped. "Objection to characterization. There is no evidence to support." Reeves lifted a hand, already turning a page. "There is ample evidence, Your Honor. It begins with this." He handed a document to the clerk, who passed it to the bench. The judge adjusted her glasses, reading aloud. "Contract of partnership, signed by Samuel Bennett and Harold Whitmore, dated March 3, 2009. Alicia watched Harold's jaw tighten. Reeves continued. "The agreement granted Mr. Bennett a 2% share in redevelopment profits. Those profits were never delivered. Following Mr. Bennett's death, which occurred on Grandmont property under suspicious circumstances, his contractual claim was erased from financial records. Here," he said, placing another exhibit on the table, "is the altered ledger from the same year. Note the missing line item." The courtroom air thickened. Reeves's voice carried steady and sharp, each sentence like a chisel against stone. Elaine leaned toward her husband, whispering furiously. He didn't respond. "Your Honor," Reeves said, "we also have a handwritten note found in the west wing of the Grandmont Hotel, written by Samuel Bennett hours before his death." He handed it forward. The judge read silently for a moment, then looked up. "It says, they know. If anything happens, tell Alicia to trust Reeves." A murmur rippled again, this time, tinged with emotion. Alicia lowered her eyes briefly, her hands clasped in her lap. The Whitmore's lawyer rose again, his voice sharp with forced control. "This is conjecture. There's no proof my clients had anything to do with the man's accident." Reeves didn't flinch. "No proof, yet. But we have testimony from 3 former maintenance employees who confirmed that Samuel Bennett reported safety violations and financial irregularities to Mr. Clayton, then manager, just days before his death. They were subsequently dismissed without cause. We also have Mr. Clayton's signed statement confirming that the Whitmores pressured him to keep those reports buried. All eyes turned to Clayton. His shoulders sagged as if the weight of every hidden lie had finally settled there. "It's true," he said quietly, voice cracking. "I did what they asked. I shouldn't have, but I did. Samuel tried to do the right thing, and I let them destroy him." Elaine gasped, her face flushing. "You liar." Clayton looked. 2009. Alicia watched Harold's jaw tighten. Reeves continued. The agreement granted Mr. Bennett a 2% share in redevelopment profits. Those profits were never delivered. Following Mr. Bennett's death, which occurred on Grandmont property under suspicious circumstances, his contractual claim was erased from financial records. "Here," he said, placing another exhibit on the table, "is the altered ledger from the same year. Note the missing line item." The courtroom air thickened. Reeves's voice carried steady and sharp, each sentence like a chisel against stone. Elaine leaned toward her husband, whispering furiously. He didn't respond. "Your Honor," Reeves said, "we also have a handwritten note found in the west wing of the Grandmont Hotel, written by Samuel Bennett hours before his death." He handed it forward. The judge read silently for a moment, then looked up. "It says, they know. If anything happens, tell Alicia to trust Reeves." A murmur rippled again, this time, tinged with emotion. Alicia lowered her eyes briefly, her hands clasped in her lap. The Whitmore's lawyer rose again, his voice sharp with forced control. "This is conjecture. There's no proof my clients had anything to do with the man's accident." Reeves didn't flinch. "No proof, yet. But we have testimony from 3 former maintenance employees who confirmed that Samuel Bennett reported safety violations and financial irregularities to Mr. Clayton, then manager, just days before his death. They were subsequently dismissed without cause. We also have Mr. Clayton's signed statement confirming that the Whitmores pressured him to keep those reports buried. All eyes turned to Clayton. His shoulders sagged as if the weight of every hidden lie had finally settled there. "It's true," he said quietly, voice cracking. "I did what they asked. I shouldn't have, but I did. Samuel tried to do the right thing, and I let them destroy him." Elaine gasped, her face flushing. "You liar." Clayton looked up, trembling. "You wanted him gone, Elaine. You both did. You said one worker's life wasn't worth the embarrassment of an inquiry." The room erupted. The judge struck her gavel hard. "Order." When the noise died, Alicia's pulse was pounding. Her throat burned, but she kept still. Reeves laid a hand on her arm, grounding her. "Thank you, Mr. Clayton," Reeves said quietly. "No further questions." Clayton lowered his head, tears tracing the lines of age and regret. Reeves turned back to the bench. "Your Honor, the Bennett estate seeks formal recognition of its rightful share in the Grandmont, and a full investigation into the circumstances of Samuel Bennett's death. This is not just about money. It's about truth denied for 14 years." The judge leaned back, thoughtful. "And what does the plaintiff herself wish to say?" Reeves glanced at Alicia. She hesitated, then stood. Her hands were trembling, but her voice, when it came, was steady. "My father taught me that dignity isn't given, it's kept," she said. "He wasn't perfect, but he was honest. He believed that a building is only as strong as the truth it stands on. The Grandmont was built on his hands, and then it buried him. I'm not here for revenge, Your Honor. I just want his name to be clean. I want no one else to be treated like they're invisible. For a long moment, the courtroom was silent except for the hum of the lights. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you, Miss Bennett. She turned to the Whitmores. Do you have anything to add? Harold cleared his throat, his voice shaking with restrained anger. This is a witch hunt. I've donated millions to this city. I don't deserve. Mr. Whitmore, the judge interrupted sharply. You may be accustomed to rooms where money speaks louder than truth. This is not one of them. The word struck like a verdict before the verdict. By the end of the day, the judge's ruling was clear, an injunction. Raising Whitmore assets related to the hotel, an independent audit of Grandmont records, and immediate recognition of the Bennett estate's claim pending final settlement. Alicia sat very still as the words sank in. Justice didn't roar, it whispered, calm and certain, through the rhythm of the gavel. When the court adjourned, reporters swarmed the hall. Cameras flashed. Reeves shielded her with a hand at her back, guiding her through the crowd. She barely heard the questions. How does it feel? Will you take over the hotel? Outside, snow was falling again, soft and quiet. She stopped on the courthouse steps and looked up, letting the cold touch her face. Reeves joined her. It's not over, he said gently. They'll appeal, and there'll be months of filings. But today, your father's name is clean. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. That's all I ever wanted. He nodded. You did it. She shook her head. No. We did it. Him, you, everyone who finally spoke. Reeves looked out at the snow-covered city. You realize, he said softly, this case will change things, not just for you, but for the people still working there. They'll see what one voice can do. Alicia glanced back toward the courthouse doors, where Clayton stood in silence, watching her. Their eyes met. She gave him a small nod, not of forgiveness, not yet, but of acknowledgement. He lowered his head, understanding. When she turned back to Reeves, her expression was calm. Let's go home, she said. He smiled faintly. You mean the Grandmont? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. It's time it became one again. As they walked down the steps together, the snow muffled every sound except the slow crunch of their footsteps. Above them, the courthouse clock struck 3, a quiet, steady rhythm marking the moment where truth became part of the record. For the first time since her father's death, Alicia Bennett felt light enough to breathe. Spring came late to the city that year. The snow lingered long after the court's verdict, as though even the weather was reluctant to let go of the season of reckoning. But on the morning the Grandmont reopened, the sunlight returned, soft, steady, and unafraid. The hotel's new brass plaque gleamed in the entranceway. The engraved letters caught the light like a quiet truth finally spoken. The Grandmont Hotel. Established 1898, restored 2025. In honor of Samuel Bennett. Alicia stood before it, her reflection faint in the polished metal. She wasn't wearing her maid's uniform anymore. Today, her clothes were simple but dignified, a navy dress and a linen coat, her father's old pocket watch tucked inside her palm. She ran her fingers across his name and felt something settle deep inside her chest, something still and strong. Reeves appeared beside her, his familiar leather briefcase in hand. They finished it this morning, he said, his voice low, almost reverent. The board approved the dedication unanimously. Unanimously? Alicia gave a small smile. That's a word I never thought I'd hear in this building. He returned the smile. Fear does strange things to people. So does conscience. For a moment, they simply stood together, watching the sunlight move across the plaque. Beyond the entrance, staff bustled quietly, preparing the lobby for the reopening ceremony. The Grandmont had survived, but not unchanged. The Whitmores were gone, bankrupt, their assets seized, their names whispered only in the past tense of scandal. Clayton had vanished into early retirement, his testimony earning him freedom but not peace. And Alicia Bennett, who once scrubbed floors until her hands bled, was now listed as operations partner. A title she still didn't quite know how to wear. "Are you ready?" Reeves asked. "No," she said honestly. "But I'll go anyway." The lobby smelled faintly of lemon oil and fresh paint. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, catching the chandeliers her father once polished. The reporters were fewer now, justice wasn't as glamorous when it required rebuilding. A handful of guests mingled by the reception desk, murmuring about the remarkable woman who had saved the hotel from disgrace. Alicia greeted the staff one by one. The bellboys, the cleaners, the receptionists, all the invisible hands who had once shared her shadow. Some looked nervous, unsure how to treat her now. Others smiled openly, relief softening their faces. She stopped beside Mrs. Turner, who was straightening the new uniforms. "You stayed," Alicia said. "Didn't have the heart to leave," the old woman replied. "Besides, someone has to make sure this place remembers who kept it alive." Alicia laughed quietly. "That's what I'm counting on." A hush fell across the room as the mayor entered to make a brief speech. Cameras flashed. The words were predictable: gratitude, justice, resilience, but Alicia barely heard them. Her eyes drifted upward to the mezzanine balcony where her father used to stand during repairs, surveying the hotel with quiet pride. For a heartbeat, she almost saw him there again, ghostly in the sunlight, smiling that patient smile of his. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped to the podium. Her voice carried softly, without grandeur, but it filled the room. "My father believed that dignity doesn't come from wealth or title, it comes from honesty. The Grandmont forgot that for a while. It became a place where appearances mattered more than people. But buildings, like people, can change if someone is willing to rebuild them from the foundation up." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "This hotel wasn't just my father's workplace, it was his legacy. And now, it will be a place that honors the people who keep it standing, not just the ones who sleep beneath its chandeliers. From today onward, every employee of the Grandmont will share in its success. No more invisible hands. No more silence." There was a moment of stunned quiet, then applause, soft at first, then growing. It wasn't the applause of spectacle, but of understanding. Reeves watched from the side, pride flickering across his face like a private sunrise. Later, when the guests dispersed, Alicia wandered alone through the halls. The West Wing had been restored, the dust and decay replaced by warm light and quiet remembrance. The maintenance room where her father had fallen was now a small memorial, a single framed photograph, his tools mounted beneath it, his handwritten note preserved behind glass. "If they silence me, promise me you will not seek revenge, but justice." She stood before it for a long time. The light from the window touched her face, and for the first time since his death, she didn't feel the ache of loss. She felt continuation. Behind her, Reeves's footsteps echoed softly. "They'll be arriving soon," he said. "The board wants to review your plans for the staff cooperative." "Let them wait a few minutes," she murmured. "This is where the real meeting is." He followed her gaze and nodded. "He'd be proud." She smiled faintly. "He'd probably tell me to stop talking and get back to work." Reeves chuckled. "Then I suppose I should be going, too. The world has other wrongs to chase. Will you stay in touch?" "Always." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, Alicia, you didn't just restore a hotel. You reminded an entire city that justice doesn't always wear a suit." Their eyes met, two weary souls who had carried the same burden for different reasons. She reached out, shaking his hand firmly. "Goodbye, Mr. Reeves." "Not goodbye," he said gently. "Just until next time." Evening came quietly. The last of the sunlight stretched across the marble floors, painting everything gold. The Grandmont was alive again, but differently now, its beauty no longer built on pretense, but on resilience. Alicia walked through the lobby one last time before closing. She paused at the reception desk, where a young maid stood polishing the counter, the same age Alicia had been when she first started. The girl looked up shyly. "Miss Bennett?" "Yes. I just wanted to say, thank you. For making this place different." Alicia smiled, her throat tightening. "It's your place now, too. Remember that." She turned toward the great glass doors. Outside, the city glowed beneath a gentle dusk. The air smelled of spring rain and renewal. She stepped onto the front steps and looked back once more at the building that had once been her cage and was now her inheritance. In the reflection of the glass doors, she saw both herself and her father's faint silhouette, two generations overlapping in light. "Today things change," she whispered. The words no longer felt like a wish. They were a truth fulfilled. As the doors closed behind her, the brass plaque caught the last of the sun. For a heartbeat, it gleamed so brightly that even the shadows bowed to it. The Grandmont stood silent, no longer burdened by ghosts, only held by memory, and by a name that had finally been given its place in the light. And in that stillness, as evening deepened into night, the ground beneath it shifted, not in tremor or collapse, but in renewal, as if the earth itself had exhaled at last.